Welcome to another interesting episode of our Cultural Heritage Program. Currently, we are at the Cape Coast Castle, where slave trade took place about 200 years ago. Join me while our tour guide, Thomas Abankwa, educates us more about this castle. Thomas, please, can you tell us something about this castle?
We stand right inside Cape Coast slave dungeons. Others do call this place Cape Coast Castle, which happens to be the third smallest castle that was built by the Europeans when they came to our shores. Of which actually along the coast of West Africa, over 60 fortin castles were built in here. Just that Ghana alone had more than 40 of them, all because of gold. That is why this area once was called Gold Coast. And out of that, Nigeria, Benin, Niger had the name Slave Coast, because that was where most of the West Africans actually were captured from, telling us that Ivory Coast and others all got their names based on the resource that the Europeans were actually getting from their lands. Present day Ghana, let me say the north areas like Salaga, Jendi, Tumu, Pikoro were slave markets. The middle belt, Kentampo, Atebubu, Kumasi, before they journeyed them all to the coast. But then before they would get them into the fort and castles, they had a place called Asin Manso, which happens to be a slave market as well. Over there, they actually get their last bath as Africans, where they give them food to eat to regain some strength. They actually shave them for them to look younger before shea butter was applied on their skin. And this shea butter, as we all know, you get to heal the wounds and also get to polish them. Then they bring them into the castles. So once you get into this castle, up there, a chamber called Palava Hall.
Palava Hall.
So within the Palava Hall, nurses, doctors first get to examine them. That is where they get to check their pulse, their teeth and other stuff to determine their strength.
Okay, before you continue, where do they get these nurses and
nurses and doctors actually happens to be Europeans. So they themselves were coming with actually medical officers, so that they get to examine whatever that they are buying before they take it home. So up there, after being examined, that is when they get to auction them by exchanging humans with cheap goods like gunpowder, mirror, alcoholics, fabrics, leather, ceramics, tobacco and other things. Then right after, they do bring them to the forecourts. You know, this castle itself was controlled by the Royal African Company. Just that they had some people from Liverpool, from Bristol, London, Manchester. So one trading company wouldn't be allowed to take over all of them. So then we mark them for easy identification. They do set fire, place in metals that have their embossed designs underneath them. The metals in red hot is picked from the fire. They move into an oil, a nail, directly onto your chest, shoulder or back. But as a female, shoulder, back or arm. Some preferred actually piercing them, and others were given metals before they get to separate male from female.
So that's for the identification. Okay, before we continue, you said this is the third castle. Please, can you tell us the first and second castle?
Alright, so Elmina
for
Castle. For the sake
of our viewers.
Elmina Castle needs to be the first to be built.
Elmina Castle,
around 1482. And actually, Elmina Castle was intended for gold trading. Later, it then became a slave dungeon. Second one is at Usu, that is the Christian book, which was also built by the Denmarks around 1661. For gold, ivory, salt and timber trade, and later also became a slave dungeon.
So this place too,
being the third, the smallest. And this castle was built purposely for the transatlantic slave trade.
So which people built this castle?
This was built by the English.
By the English?
Yes,
Let's continue.
So, as you just asked about the fort and castle, I guess. So you know, once you do hear about the transatlantic slave trade, it is actually talking about a trade that happened within 3 continents, which happens to be Europe, Africa, the Americas, and the Caribbean. And this whole system started around the 1500s, when the Europeans actually got to the Americas and the Caribbean. Earlier coming here, like they do say, they were missionaries, explorers, and merchants. But at the point, you know, they needed humans to work for them on their plantations. So actually, on the land where they settled, they started using the natives over there to work for them, but then due to the hardship, they were dying. Introducing them to disease like measles, pox, and others was also killing them. So they had this Catholic priest they do called Bartholomew de las Casas, who was like, they should then shift the demand to Africa. Because these Africans are proving to be strong. The African system is resilient, is robust to change, and as well, we know nothing about the new world. So if you want someone to best fit the job out there, then the Africans become the best alternative. The then Pope was by name Pope Nicholas V.
Pope Nicholas V.
Pope Nicholas also accepted this and accepted the whole trade.
He was also an English.
These were actually Portuguese and others.
So meaning this trade went on not only with the English, but then with the Portuguese and
they had the Portuguese, the Swedish, the Denmarks, the Dutch, and others also got involved in it.
Okay, can you tell us some of the trade
things they actually were?
Yes, please.
That is the gunpowder, mirror, and other stuff.
That was the main trade.
Things that they were used
to. Okay.
So once actually they came in, the Europeans themselves earlier were hunting, raiding Africans. So the numbers that they wanted to not get. So how do we get more of these Africans? They then had to use Africans to get Africans. They knew these Africans themselves already had the system of slavery. Just that the African system is more or less like, let's say, if I get to fight and I defeat you, I fuse you into my system.
Okay.
So in the olden days, we know we had villages. Villages would grow to become, let's say, communities becoming states.
Okay.
Kingdoms, and kingdom became empire. Just that the African system is made such that you could be a slave today, tomorrow become a free person. One, if you prove to have managerial skills, the master can probably give you a site to start your own plantations and others. Some got married into the master's family, and others also actually became sub-chiefs in the community. And a typical example is how the Asantes had their system. So the Europeans also took advantage of our system. So this time when they come in, they entice chiefs, because the chiefs were those leading wars.
The chiefs?
Yes, were leading wars. So let's say if you happen to be an Asante and an Asante, I probably associate myself with the English and you associate yourself with the Dutch. So if I go fight and I defeat you, I'll take you to, let's say, the English section, and the same if you defeat me, also take you to the Dutch area. So through that, they had most of the Africans in here. And then their trade never ends in Africa, because after they are done exchanging them, keeping them in the dungeons for days and months, they then had to take them back to the Americas and the Caribbean. Over there, they also get to exchange the same humans they got in here with the Ghana and others, with sugarcane, tobacco, cotton, coffee, rice, spice, and others. These raw materials are taken to Europe. In Europe, they get them transformed into finished goods, and the finished goods are all coming back to Africa for the cycle to regenerate itself. And that gave us the triangular trade, or the transatlantic slave trade. So Europe is actually the origin of the trade. Africa is the middle passage of the trade, and the Americas and the Caribbean being the final destination. Over and over, took almost 300 to 400 years before the whole trade itself would end. But in this castle alone, almost 200 years.
As we heard from Thomas, yes, this gun trade and powder trade turned into a human trade. So we're going to go around so that he tells us more. This is a graveyard where we have 4 towns. So Thomas is going to tell us the names of the people in these towns, in those 4 towns. Thomas, please can you tell us something about these 4 towns? And also with this one, why it is separated from the 3.
Alright, so we stand right at the courtyard of the castle.
And
this place used to be a graveyard for the Europeans as well.
They
had the excavation here in the year 1996, and after they left just 4 of them, all because they were the only ones with inscriptions as to the person buried underneath. And out of the 4, this happens to be the only African that was buried amongst the Europeans. Famous Philip Kwaku. Originally he is Kwiku, a Wednesday born from this town. His father, Obrimpon Kojo, was one of the middlemen, or let me say the traders that were bringing captives in here. So due to his activities in the castle, the church actually gave the man a scholarship to be given to his son. At the age of 11, Kwiku left this place to England. So in England, that was where he got baptized into the Anglican faith, and they gave him the name Philip. And his original name, Kwiku, was anglicized to Kwaku, and that made him Philip Kwaku. Age 24, Kwiku became the first African to be ordained as an Anglican priest. After completing Oxford University, he was back in the castle. So right up there, happens to be a missionary. Preaching to the Europeans up there, whilst other Africans were staying beneath him. And he served this castle for almost 50 years before he died.
So initially when he came, he was being fed, but when it got to some time, he has to feed himself.
Salary was not coming. Focused much on commerce to feed himself, and to work as a missionary here. And through that, he introduced us to Western education. That is why in Ghana, we do attribute the Western education to him. So the first basic school that was built then Gold Coast era had been named after him as Philip Kwaku Boys, which is right here in Cape Coast. And when we talk about schools, in terms of castle schools, one of the schools happens to be this area. So it was a church and at the same time a classroom.
This very place?
Yes, this very place. So above the dungeon happens to be a church as well as a classroom, where most of the kids the Europeans had with the blacks were those being educated up there, not Africans.
Okay.
So earlier it was only mulattoes that had this kind of education before later. Some of the Africans also had to benefit from it when Philip Kwaku introduced it to the community. He actually died at the age of 75.
Oh, okay.
Closer to me here happens to be C.B. Whitehead. And C.B. Whitehead happens to be one of the officials in the castle. The cause of his death is unknown. Some do say it was malaria that killed him. Others are saying the Asantis rather killed him. And some do say it was the Dutch that killed him. He died around 1812, age 38.
Oh, okay.
The one in the middle is a lady with the name Letitia Elizabeth Landon. Others do say Mrs. McLean, the wife of George McLean. She was in the castle to visit George McLean and died exactly 2 months. Yes, when she died, rumors spread that she poisoned herself, or because she got to know the husband, George McLean, was having an African mistress. Others also do say the African mistress rather came to the castle, posed as a maid, went in there and poisoned her. And some are saying she had malaria. So as it stands, we still don't know what actually killed her.
Okay.
Age 36, she also died. At the extreme end is George McLean himself.
George McLean
Yes,
himself, okay.
I'm sure you probably know of McLean. He's very popular in our history. He actually designed the bond of 1844. And he used us as well to the first Western court named after him as McLean's Hall. And through that court system, he designed the bond I made mention. Some literatures do say it was signed at Formina. It was never signed. Formina's treaty is different from the bond of 1844.
Okay, so as we heard from Thomas, the bond was signed in 1844, right here at the castle. So it's not at Elmina, as some people have been saying.
Malaria confirmed also killed him. Those days, when they came in, because of these tropical diseases, once they die in here, they do attribute the cause of the death to malaria. Even if someone kills them, they do mostly say it was malaria. That is why even West Africa had the name white man's grave, these tropical diseases.
Okay, can we please continue to the other rooms? Okay. We are the male dungeons where the male captives were being kept. Please, what's happened over here?
Alright, so just as you just said, in the male dungeons, we do have 5 chambers in here.
Okay.
The first, second, where we stand, the third, fourth, to the 5th chamber. And it would surprise you that per the estimate in here, about 700 to 1,000 captives can fill these 5 spaces. Which is to say, a chamber can take more than 150 people at a time.
Small place?
Yes. And those days, they were not counting them. They just keep packing them in here. Once the place is full, other areas get loaded. Humans were hunted, raided, so they wouldn't always get them in numbers. So sometimes the numbers could even be less than that. Get to know in here, there's nothing for you to use to clean your teeth. Take a bath in here. The place you start, you defecate, you urinate, and you sleep in here.
On the bare floor, just like that?
A lot of them got sick because, staying in here, due to the condition, communicable disease will spread amongst them. No captive in the castle was actually given the befitting rest I know of. When you die, your body moves straight into the sea.
Were they being fed?
They were fed twice a day, morning and evening, but most often because they were working in the castle, they feed them outside. When you had nothing done, that was what food was brought into the dungeons for them to feed themselves. And in the dungeons too, it was not evenly distributed. Once you are that strong, you probably get more. And if you are weak, you might even get to starve in here.
So how many months, years, did they stay here?
All right, so let me say, it took just a day for them to leave this end, and others also could live here almost 2 or 3 months. And I'm giving a duration of 2 or 3 months because today, we do have propellers to move faster, but they sometimes take a ship, bringing cargoes from America almost 2 weeks. And those days, they were sailing. So if they are sailing, let's say a month, we take them from this place into the New World. From there, the ship is to go to Europe first. From Europe before the ship comes back here. So if it's a month interval, that's giving us 3 months. So if you are lucky, they bring you today, the ship comes the next day, you leave with the ship. But if unfortunately the ship leaves today and you are to get in the next day, you then have to wait for the next ship coming, of which you probably wouldn't know. So if you survive, you join them. When you die, your body straight into the sea.
And where were they taken to?
Majority of them were taken to the Caribbean, as well as the northern part of the Americas, and as well the southern part of the Americas. So the southern part, you can name Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, and others. The Caribbean lands, Haiti, Jamaica, Cuba, Trinidad and Tobago, Bahamas, Barbados, and others. The northern part to Florida, North and South Carolina, Mississippi, Virginia, Georgia, Atlanta, and other places as well.
Meaning they spread them out throughout.
Yeah.
Okay. On the bare floor here, with the bricks, we can see that some are painted yellow, others have red bricks. Please, what was the difference between these two bricks?
Some of the bricks actually were manufactured in here. Others also were brought from Europe. But normal clay brick actually looks yellowish, but when you burn them, they look brownish. So this happens to be the original floor of the dungeon. But in the year 1974, before then, we had the whole place being filled with these things we are seeing here.
Okay.
So 1973, as I made mention, a group of archaeologists from the University of Ghana came in here and had an excavation done in the first chamber. So during the excavation, they discovered the bricks happened to be the original floor of the dungeon. And for that, they had to take samples of what they got from this place to their lab to test them. And the results they had says everything we work on from the second chamber through to the fifth chamber happens to be the toilet, the vomit, the sweat, the blood, the food particles. You can name them. Things that we humans, we mostly do excrete just from our system is what we work on here. And they left these things here because they knew some of us wouldn't believe it. And as well for others also to prove further, they left these and as well to maintain the history in here. So all we see here are all human waste mixed with sand.
Thomas, you said earlier on that the bricks were manufactured here.
Yes, some were manufactured
Okay. The materials that were being used to build this castle, were they imported?
Let me say some were imported, others also were gotten from this land because definitely if you are to get sand, because we are the shores, you probably get sand from this end. But most of the things you are seeing happens to be rocks from the same land. Bricks, some were manufactured here, others were also imported. But in the binding material, I was surprised that it's not cement, but rather oyster shells, limestone, palm oil, and grinded or bent shells as well, mixed together. So we mostly call these walls as a breathing wall. So unlike cement that actually cracks, let me say cakes, this one it allows water to pass through it so that once it rains, it absorbs water, sun shines on it, it gets stronger. So this we are seeing here, no iron rods, no cement in the castle. It is only combination of the things I made mention we are seeing all over the place.
Okay, please, what about the shrine?
All right, so before I even talk about the shrine, the fifth chamber was actually a sorting chamber. So in here, when ships were ready to get the captive from this place, those that were seen extremely weak were separated, kept in this chamber. The rest were chained in groups. They forced them through a tunnel which connects this place to the door or the gate of no return, of which you remember I made mention Captain George McLean blocked a certain tunnel. So the tunnel was at the back of the white cloth. Blocking it was to symbolize the English ending their trade, but then practically they were still smuggling Africans. But in this shrine we are seeing here was not actually then here when the captives were staying. But then before the land itself was given to the Europeans, the natives would come in to worship a shrine they call an atabil. I'm sure you being a Ghanaian, you know of Abosume Diosonso or 77 deities of the Ogwa people, and the stone we see happens to be the head. When they gave the land to the Europeans, they were not allowed to come into worship. So they had to take samples of it into the town for it to be worshipped until the year 1960s when the castle was given back to us. 1973, they brought them back, created this altar and placed it here to worship it. So today, those that still do have their belief in the system still do come in here to worship. That is why we see things they use for their prayers and chairs they sit on for consultation and prayers as well.
Okay, thank you. Can we move to the female dungeons?
Yes,
Indeed, Ghana has a story to tell. We are in the female slave dungeon. Thomas, what went on over here?
all right, so just as I made mention in the male dungeons, the same thing happened here. Just that the numbers were not as much as the males over there. Town actually could take about 150 captives in terms of the females, and the females do have separate chambers, unlike the males where they had a joint dungeon. Here 150, the other one also 150. And while staying in here, you do everything in as well. The only difference between the male and the female dungeons, as we all know, only females do menstruate. So just imagine yourself, if you are to stay in here for more than a month and nobody comes to pick you to rape you, it means you're going to stay in here with your menses. So you could imagine the infections, the pain, the stench, the trauma they had to endure before ship will come and get them from this place.
I was coming to that. So do you mean that even tissues were not given to them during their menstrual period?
There was nothing given to them like that. So some of them actually got a chance to wash themselves in here. And that was only when you accept rape. You know, the Europeans were not coming with their wives. So whenever they wanted to actually have their way, they come in here, pick any lady of their choice, they take you upstairs, they keep you clean before they take you upstairs to be raped. And some of these ladies also got pregnant. But then when you are pregnant and they get to see it, you are not going to be kept in here. They rather take them out of this place into the stone houses they built into the township, where they take care of you for you to give birth. And after giving birth, you breastfeed the baby for some months, and you, the mother, you report back for the next available ship to take you from this place. But then the babies, because they belong to them, they take care of them and as well get to educate them. So you remember I said they were teaching kids within the school, so it was these kids that were being taken up there.
Then I would rather prefer getting raped to be taken away from here.
Some preferred getting raped, others also wanted to uphold the little dignity they had in here. Because if you consider me not to be human, there's no way you get to sleep with me as well.
So those that refused to be raped, what happened to them also?
Once you refused, they had a cell we call the punishment cell that females were also kept, just for you to get a change of mind, so that next time if they want to pick you, probably give in or allow yourself for the rape.
What were some of the punishments?
Punishment, you keep or you stay in that cell for almost a week and more. Some of them also were asked to pick mortar balls, which were that heavy, and with these punishments, if you're unable to continue, you probably had to give in for them to have their way. Others also will still uphold the dignity they had in here till probably they were shed from this end.
Can you tell us something about these rifts over there?
These reed flowers we see there were brought in by visitors like yourself. You know, I made mention that most of them that died in there, their bodies were dumped into the sea. And we do have the belief that the souls of those that died in here are still in the castles. So when visitors do bring them, we don't later around. Rather, we keep them in the cells and the dungeons just to honor, to respect, and to remember our ancestors. So we see them there just to honor and respect and remember our ancestors. Yeah.
Thomas, yes. What were these canoe balls used for?
All right, so you know, there's this phrase we do say that every profitable business do attract competitors.
Exactly.
So because the business in there was very profitable in terms of the human trade as well as the gold trade, other Europeans or the Europeans themselves were fighting themselves for lands in Africa, specifically say Ghana. So when you get a place for trade and you don't protect your end, others are willing to fight you. So the English coming here brought mortars and cannons. So when they see enemies coming from the sea or the land, they first put in gunpowder into the cannons. They place the balls, as you see here, at the mouth of the cannon. Yes, and then they light the match at the tail and boom. So balls like these would enter enemy ship, water gets into the ship and it would sink into the sea. But then you can see some of them having holes in them. So the ones with the holes, they fill the space with gunpowder. Wow. So that when they hit the ship, it can get to explode for the ship to sink faster. And for that, the English survived here for a very long time. So for them coming here, they strategized themselves to conquer. Wow. So for them, fully came with these ammunitions to protect themselves from enemies or intruders.
Oh, okay. We are in front of a small cell, and I understand it's a condemned cell. What is this condemned cell for?
All right, so we stand right in front of the condemned cell, as you just said, and you know, majority of the Africans that were brought into the castle, I made mention, were warriors, because it was true tribal wars. Most of them were captured. So in the castle, some of them would want to fight the officers here. Some also would team up to escape from the castle. So those that were doing that were seen to be rebellious. For that, we killed them, for it as a deterrent for others in here not to repeat the same thing. But then for the Europeans, they wouldn't shoot them. Rather, they beat them out here before they pushed them into the cell. The cell having 3 doors, blocked behind them, no food, no water, no air, and no light. So you get dehydrated in there, you suffocate, you starve, and you die. But then the sad part is that, you know, they don't care whether you are alive or dead in there. The soldier assigned here is to be sure that all of them in there are dead before the bodies come out.
You don't mean it?
No, so that is what it is. So the aspect is, once they actually put them there, the soldier moves in to check if they are all dead. If you realize that some are still alive, they leave both the living and the dead together till they all die. That is when bodies are brought on the floor for others to have a look at it. So that next time, if you also want to repeat the same thing, remembering what you saw on the floor will deter you from trying to escape or fight officers in the castle.
So I can boldly say that the rebellious ones were brought here.
Yes, they call them rebellious ones, but then we call them the freedom fighters because they're fighting, yes, for their right. Yes.
And can we also say that they were brought here purposely to die, not to change, but to die?
Once they bring you here, you're actually being condemned to be killed. That is all. So we can have a look in there, quick one before we move on.
Okay. This is the place where the captives or the slaves were being brought for trade. Okay, Thomas, this is a very big place, so can you tell us what went on over here?
All right, so I made mention most of the captives had their last stop at Asinmanso, where they get shaved and others. So right from there, they get to separate them to different forts and castles. So in this castle, when you get here, your first point of contact would be this chamber, the Palava Hall. So in here, nurses, doctors first get to examine them to know their strength and as well how fit they are for the trade before they get to sell them. So after being examined, they even group them into domestic and commercial slaves. So the domestic ones were those to work in the castle and the commercial were those to be exported. Then right after the groupings, they start auctioning them. March them forward, so merchants also with their goods get to exchange them with the gunpowder, mirror, alcoholics and other things they brought in here before they were sent downstairs for their branding, where they heat metals onto their body. So this happens to be the Palava Hall, the same place as they actually auction humans, the same place the bond of 1844 was also signed in this chamber. Yes.
Wow. So we can say that at this Palava Hall, the human beings or the captives were exchanged for gunpowders. Am I right?
Gun, mirror, sugar, tobacco, and other things, you can name them.
We're going for a short commercial break. Don't go anywhere. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. This is a two-in-one building, a church and a school. Thomas, which people were attending the school and which of them were attending the church?
All right, so the church actually I would say was for the Europeans, as in the merchants, the soldiers, and as well they probably would have a missionary in there as well. But then the school was actually designed for the mulattoes or the mixed race. The kids they had with the blacks were those that were brought up there to be educated. But I know mostly my focus here is not even having the church here, but I get to know the church is actually right on top of the dungeon. And before you would walk into the church, you probably get to see, smell, and hear everything that was happening down there through this hole we see here. So whilst others would walk in here to say love your neighbor as yourself, directly beneath them other neighbors probably would stay there struggle. Thou shalt not kill, humans were being killed in the condemned cell. Thou shalt not commit adultery, females were being raped, and as well thou shalt not steal. Humans, goods and other things were being stolen from Africa as well. So what they themselves were preaching here, they themselves not even actually acting accordingly, as they see. So a church up there, a dungeon right beneath us. Here, once you give birth, the only point you have connection with your kid is when you are breastfeeding the baby. But after the breastfeeding,
only at the time of breastfeeding.
So after breastfeeding, then you, the mother, you are seen fit. It is said they get them separated. So the mothers and the babies do not have any connection again, because you probably will be shipped the next available ship coming in probably will take it from this end. So with that, there is no connection you'd have with our kids in here. So most of them were taken care of by nannies and nurses, and when they grow, they do bring them to the church, which today happens to be a library, as we can all see here. The mulattoes were not slaves.
They were not.
I would say were those that were, let me say, they were kids that were actually, I don't know how to put it, but they were rather educated to take over their father's activities in here. So that was the structure. So they knew Africans were stronger, so probably getting a mixed blood would help them to get to control their captives. So then they also get to brainwash some of them to take over the activities. Others also went back to England, Netherlands, and other places also to get their education and as well take over the activities and do other stuff. So once you talk about mulatto happens to be someone of different races, as in two races coming together to give a baby. So it could be a black and a white, it could be an Asian and a black, it could be an Asian and a white. So once it is actually a mixed blood, not from one particular race, they probably happen to be mulattoes. Yes.
So how often do people come here for visitation?
All right, so let me say in terms of visitation, every day the castle works. We don't have any resting day. Unless probably maybe there has been something that actually stops us from coming to work. Apart from that, we work from Monday to Monday. And mostly, but we do have tourism seasons, as in we do have time that we do have a lot of visitors in here, mostly December being the peak, as well as around this area there, June, July, August, when the Americans are in their summertime and all that. And as well, let's say early part of the year, also we do have an event every day the castle operates. And we work from 8 to 9.
This door of no return, where does it lead to? Does it lead to their freedom or not coming back to the castle?
All right, so once you hear about the door of no return, it should tell you that once you go through it, there's no way you're coming back. So Africans that were chained, that were in ropes, that made it out of this place, never came back. Once you walk through the door, you lose your rights as a human being, you lose your connection with your people, and you also get to lose your identity as an African. And I would say you lose your identity or because probably they were captured from different areas. But then once they make it to the final place, their names are being taken from them. They give them new names. They are forced to learn new languages. They are forced to learn new culture and other stuff. So probably you get to lose your identity itself.
Did I hear that they are forced to be given new names?
Yes.
So can you mention some of the names?
So probably let's say Akwesi Abankwa as an Ashanti, or Asante, not Ashanti, Asante. Let's say you are
Irene Kwachi.
let me see, Efia Kwachi, another Akan. But then when we get to the plantation, probably you might be, let's say, from the Fanti, and I'm probably on Asante. But then when we get there, we are all going to be Christianized with names like Thomas and Irene. Wow. If our master happens to be Smith, I become Thomas Smith, you become Irene Smith. So now who gets to be the Kwachi and who gets to be the Abankwa? So probably all get to get the same identity, if I may say it, yes. So when they take them outside, put them on canoes, some of them thought they were going to be killed. And for you being killed by someone, it's better you kill yourself. So they had to jump into the sea to commit suicide. Wow. But then once you jump, because they were chained in groups, you probably get to pull others with you. Then you all move into the sea, then you die together. But then when you are probably make it to the bigger ship, that is where the weaker ones sometimes get unchained and the strong ones still remain in chains. Then they lay them on flaps like sardines, head, tail, packed in groups before they move them into the New World. And remember, I made mention of some areas where they were shipped. Yeah. That is to Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, Caribbean lands, North, West Indies and other places. And today we see black spread all over the world. So if there is no question, you can probably walk through the door of no return.
Okay.
Probably. All right, so the captives or the enslaved Africans were brought out of the door or the gate of no return. But you know, the Europeans themselves wouldn't use that door they had here because the door was very short and narrow, just as you saw in Elmina. So for them, they had their own door coming up from this end, down through the steps. Then would actually put them all on canoes. Then the canoes would move them into the bigger ships, and the bigger ship was actually to take them from this place into the New World. You know, due to the activities the Europeans had in here, this whole place actually was called the Europeans' Beach. So no black person was allowed here those days. Until today, as we can all see it being a fishing harbor, or let me say a fishing village for the community as well. Right over there happens to be a door of return, at the flip of the door of no return. We had this door of return in the year 1998 when we celebrated our first Emancipation Day, and we call it the Big or the Great Homecoming Day. On that day, descendants of those that survived the journey were asked to come back home to interact and fill their own lands once again. But then the living community never came alone, they rather came with their ancestors, of which they brought in two mortal remains. One was to represent the Caribbean, and the other was to represent the Americas. So from New York, a man by name Samuel Carlson, and from Jamaica, a lady by name Madame Crystal. Mortar remains were brought to Ghana to a place called Abanzi, where they have Fort Amsterdam, and from Amsterdam they had to use the Atlantic Ocean through the same door of no return, just to break the jinx and the chains that said no slave makes it back. But then just as they were taken out of the door onto the sea, the same sea also brought them home through that door, and that gave us a new narrative as the door of return. They had a ritual for the dead ones in there, and after I remember that not all that came out of this door were Ghanaians, because some were actually from Nigeria, Benin, Mali, Togo and others. Just that majority of them, once they were brought in, had their last stop at Asenmanso. So for them not to be biased, probably had to pick these two mortar remains over there to be reburied or reinterred. So today, if you visit Asenmanso, you probably see the grave of Crystal, that of Samuel Carlson, resting peacefully over there. Yeah.
Okay. So wrapping everything up, what advice will you give to those, especially outside?
In this castle, the best narrator of the history should be the castle, because none of us here was born those days to know what happened here. But then out of literature's reference, what we do learn, we also get to give tourists, or let me say those that visit the castle, information. I must say the history in here probably, as it all sounds, probably traumatic, emotional, but then the most important aspect is the lesson we are learning from this place. Today the world is claiming they've ended slavery, but then deep within us we all know we are living with slavery. So I always say, as a living being, if we wouldn't want these things to happen to you, never should involve ourselves in any of these acts. It happened. Today's history. But then today we keep repeating history because we're not learning from history. So we should actually get to learn our history, so probably we didn't get to repeat the same mistake again. Then as humans, we do away with this type of differences, as in racial difference, political difference, economic difference, which is another, because in the end, we are all humans. So what I wish for myself, equally you deserve the same thing. So probably, I wish all would come as well, visit the castle, get to learn a lot, not just about what we just heard today, but we have a lot to talk about. So once you come in here, we are also in to serve it, or serve you people.
It has been an educative show on today's Cultural Heritage program. As our local dialect goes, Titi Wobika, Titi Wobitre, indeed we have a history to tell. I hope your next place of visit will be the Cape Coast Castle, where you'll witness things yourself. Join me again next time. My name is Irene Kwache Danso.